There we go.
Cool. Welcome, episode 273 of Together BHA. You are with Craig and Robin. Robin, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, back from holiday. We've just had a little off-air discussion about some plumbing drama that I'm not going to go into on here. But yeah, all good.
Yeah,
Other
that's
than
sorting
that,
itself out. Perfect timing for Christmas, I'm sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
but yeah, otherwise all good.
Yeah, all good.
Good. Um, cool. So we just come off the back of Palace and we both weren't on that podcast. So I was going to take 30, 60 seconds just to get your thoughts because I didn't watch the Palace game, right? I think that's probably for the best. But just a quick 60 seconds. Obviously, it's going to set the tone of like walking into West Ham and going, okay, what do we need from this game? But just a quick synopsis of what you thought of the Palace game and maybe coming out of that game.
Yeah, I mean, it was a kind of everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong in that game.
Yeah.
We didn't play especially well. We got punished from a couple of defensive errors that we've become quite prone to. And we had too many players just had an off day on the same day. I've kind of mellowed. I've mellowed slightly in the week since. I'm not sugarcoating it. I mean, it was a bad performance against any team, but to put that performance in against Palace was obviously dreadful. But yeah, too many of the same mistakes that we keep making.
And I think that probably there was a few mistakes in the game yesterday against West Ham as well, and we'll come on to those. But it feels like a team that's a bit low in confidence, right? So I think that's sort of where my headset was going. Okay, two draws, 2 losses. You're coming into West Ham. We tend to do quite well at their place, and you go, okay, cool. So the lineups, we saw a couple of changes. We saw Veltman come in. We saw Gruder come in. So we'll talk about that as well. And you had Vifa and Baleba as the double pivot. So all in all, a couple of good changes for me. But what were your thoughts? I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but like, what were your thoughts at the time?
I had no complaints at all because I mean, one of the big issues from the Palace game was our right hand side. In that Lamptey didn't have a particularly good game. He's not an unbelievable defender, even on his best of days. And we've already talked about Minte historically or so far hasn't done a huge amount of helping out in defence either. So for a lot of that Palace game, we didn't have much of a right side of the pitch. So obviously great having Veltman back because we know our record this season with Veltman is pretty stark, is that we haven't won a game when he hasn't played. So obviously good to have Veltman back. Gruder coming in was a bit of a left field one, but I was quite happy because he's looked pretty solid. I think it was at the Man City game that he looked pretty solid in.
He's bright.
Yeah, he's a bright. So I didn't have any issues with that. And Ayari has dropped a little bit from his early season heights. I think the last few games have passed him by a little bit, and his ball retention has not been phenomenal. So I thought it was sensible to put Weaver in. I thought that Enciso might have been close to a start because he was the only bright spark from the Palace game when he came on. And he did look really enthusiastic and was trying to put himself about. But no, when I looked at the 11, I had no complaints with it at all. The only, and this is where inevitably it kind of splits people down the middle if you look on social media as well. I did sigh a little bit when I still saw Dunk in the 11. Don't come at me in the comments, but he didn't have his best game against Palace either. But as I say, that didn't kind of put him in a particularly small group of players. But he did all right. I mean, we'll come on to it. I thought he had a pretty solid game yesterday. Obviously, he got an assist and he looked pretty decent back to the standards that we've expected. But yeah, that was the only one. Beyond that, I was quite happy with it.
Yeah. I think we'll come on to the Dunk thing, but I think for me the team sheet was good. I think Gruder on the right hand side was a little bit weird. Like I have him as an 8 or a 10 in my brain, so it was kind of weird to see that. But the way that we're playing at the moment, all 4 of those attacking players tend to shift around. So you see Ruter in the 9, the 10. You see him on the left. You even saw Matoma out on the right hand side at one point yesterday too. So there's a lot of shifting about. There's a lot of trust in those players to really identify where everyone else is, so that they can fill those gaps in. I guess, one of the advantages of the system that we're playing. But I agree with you. I think Veltman coming back was huge. I think that's just, it brings you this solidity that you miss when you have Lamptey. I think Lamptey's great from an attacking perspective, and it gives you that unpredictability. But your two draws and 2 losses, like, you need to steady the ship. Maybe just shore things up a little bit. So I didn't have a problem with the team sheet. I think with the West Ham thing, it was a bit tough to go there yesterday. For those that watched it, the Oscar Fares news and a 15-year-old academy goalkeeper that unfortunately lost their battle with cancer. So I felt like when I was watching it as well, there was a really G'd up atmosphere as well that we probably didn't need, as somber as the news was. And I felt like the first 10 minutes sort of reflected that. I think we really couldn't get our teeth in, and we couldn't find ourselves in that first 10 minutes. There was a Bowen chance on 7 minutes, but in general, that sort of start to the game, again, didn't start well, right?
Yeah, it was back to a little bit like that De Zerbi-ism that we had, which was really slow out of the blocks. And in certain games, it's all right, and in other games, it immediately puts you on the back foot. I think also Lopetegui's dad had passed away as well. I think well, which adds to the kind of a tough week for it. But I don't know if you remember the West Ham game from last season, which was the 0-0. And it was one of the I think it's one of the most turgid games of football I've ever seen at any level. But it certainly, the first few minutes felt like a continuation of that, where there was a bit of effort going in, but there wasn't an enormous amount of quality within the first few minutes from either side.
It looked messy. I think I'm looking at my notes on this left-hand side, and I just put first 10 messy. And that pretty much reflected what the start of the game was. This is something with Hurstler as well, is that when you get to that 20-minute mark, you tend to settle down and you start to get the ball more and you start to understand a little bit more. I don't know if that's tactical flexibility. I don't know if that's planned or whatever, but it always feels like if you can get to 20 minutes at 0-0 or you don't make a mistake, you tend to do quite well. And that first 10 minutes, we weren't really in the game. That Bowen chance is the first real chance that we saw. Just gets past Estepinian, a little bit tight for him to do any damage, but it was tough. I think it was a tough day for Estepinian in general. But you get to like 20 minutes in. I think that we had a free kick on about 17 minutes. I think Gruder puts it to the back post. Dunk gets to the back post. We've seen that run quite a lot in our attacking set plays now. And he gets it across, but no one's there to tap it in, right? And that's your first sign that we can actually do something. Your thoughts on set pieces? I think we're starting to see a more defined play of what we're trying to achieve with back post runs, especially with Dunk. And coming on to the fact that Dunk is back in the team, he gives you that sort of presence as well. We're not scoring a lot from set pieces, but we're also not conceding a lot from set pieces, right? So I'm not too bothered there.
No, I'm not. You're right. We're looking a lot more solid. We know that was one of the three things that he kind of brought with him. He pulled out. I'd say there's definitely a plan. As you say, you can see it. There's a structure in attack and in defence. We are looking more dangerous from them, and like you say, we're not conceding them. So I think we'll get better. We're certainly. I mean, we had a low base to come from, right, in terms of performance, but we definitely look a bit more solid from that perspective for sure.
Yeah, and I think with Gruder on the free kicks as well was a bit of a surprise. I think it's some good deliveries. The first one was tragic, but like it got better over that time. And just segueing on to Gruder as well, I think it was nice to see him on the team sheet, and we just went through the team sheets and stuff. That first 20-25 minutes, he looked far too nervous and couldn't really get into the game whatsoever. I hope that does change, and I think the talent is obviously there. He's heralded as one of the sort of up and coming talents of Germany. So I hope it gets better, and that will come with game time. But I felt like he just couldn't get into the game for me. And one of the chances there where he's just on the right hand side and he's just sort of dawdling a little bit. He can't really get past Emerson. He can't really get past the double team that is happening. So we'll see what happens. I think he's a good player, but it's tough for him at the moment. But you get on to 21 minutes, another chance. The Matoma volley that comes over the top of Wan-Bissaka. He gets it on target. He's done really well to get it on target. But again, I'm coming back to the set pieces and the crosses that are coming in is that actually we're creating chances from them, right? And it was a good chance and it's a good save. Fabianski's 39. I can't believe he's still playing. But a good chance, and after 20, 25 minutes, you're going, okay, we can probably get something here. It felt abject in the first half, of course, but we were making chances. But it's just a lot of huff and puffing and no end result, right?
I think Adrian makes quite a good point in the chat. He's just said that he feels the team needs to read the game in order to be able to find who's playing in what space. And I think that illustrates your point. So for the first 10 or 15 minutes, it definitely does seem like there's a lot of working out who's playing where. We know Hertzler has this, you can call it a number of things depending on where you sit on the spectrum. You can call it kind of ultimate flexibility, or you can call it kind of organized or semi-organized chaos. But it certainly shows in the first few minutes, everyone's trying to get their feet slightly. So I think you're bang on with that. You want to try and get through to 20 minutes. Everyone gets, okay, this is where everyone's playing. This is what we're doing. And it certainly showed. It's kind of similar to playing out from the back in that it makes me very nervous. Like we can do it 100 times and it can work all the time, but it still makes me nervous in those first 20 minutes. So I just want to almost press fast forward until we get to like 15, 20 minutes and go start from there.
Yeah. And there is that period of working out. I think Adrian's right. And I think you're right. This is a very complex system, shall we say. And I think you sort of have to have the sort of players to make that system work. So you've got very smart players in Ruta and Pedro and Welbeck and Matoma and Adingra and Minte. You need a certain caliber of talent, but also a certain caliber of education and awareness and high football IQ in order to make it work. It does take those 10, 15 minutes. I think you're absolutely right. But a good chance from Matoma as well, who I thought, again, was amazing yesterday. I think he's probably my best player on the pitch for me, because I think he just makes things happen and he's just that good.
It's ridiculous control, right? Where he pulled down that pass like in the first half, and you just think he's so tight to the touchline. Yeah, he's basically on the line, right? Yeah. So you've got no room to kind of step backwards to control it, otherwise you're out. And it's just it's so good.
We sometimes, I think the one thing that we do say about Matoma is his work on composure, right? I think that's what it is. I think if you had the composure and he finishes most of the chances that he gets, not just a few of them, then he wouldn't be playing for Brighton anyway. So but that, that's by the by. But I think his first touch is one of the best I've seen ever, at least at this club, at least, from when I've been watching football. So it's just always so fun to watch him. I think it's just really good. And I think we've got that in Pedro as well, and I think that is also very good. You've got two elite runners of the ball. Ruta's sort of like a terrier almost. He reminds me of just someone that will just run and run and run. And then you've got your Gruders and your Adingras and your Mintes, and you try and fit those in. So the one thing I would say about yesterday is you are missing Welbeck still. I think you're missing a heavy presence up front and trying to bring that ball down. I think in the first half you saw a lot of Verbruggen just belting the ball up to Pedro and just hoping he gets something on it or is able to bring it down. That's tough for a player like Pedro. Tough. That's not something that he wants to be doing.
It's not his best position, is it? And it's not really where we want him. We don't want him playing. And he almost tries too hard, I think, when he's leading the line. You can see him, he's everywhere trying to get the ball, trying to make things happen. But yeah, we don't want him. We do not want him really in that leading the line role. It's not to say he can't do it, because we've seen he's got the attributes to do it.
Yeah.
But we don't want him there.
Because he's a game changer, right? Like I think what you want is your Welbecks or your Fergusons or your number 9 to do a very specific role, especially within this system. So having him as the creative outlet will always help us. There was a chance on 30 minutes where he just overruns it, right? Like a nice little move out on the left. Again, he's moved into the left. Matoma's come into the center. They're all interchanging. I can't keep up. And he just overruns it. I think he's just trying too hard. And I think that goes to your point, is that he's trying to make things happen. He could have just get a shot off and tried to make something else work. He's just gone through 2 or 3 defenders and unfortunately it's just fizzled out, right? So that's pretty much what we're saying about the first half, is that you're huffing and you're puffing, but there's nothing there and there's no clear-cut chances that are being made. The last one I've got is The last chance is the Estepinian slip at 43 minutes. Like, he just goes through. It's a good counter attack. It's a really good chance. His foot and just lets him away, and he's just
kind of
over.
sums up the first half, doesn't it? Really. Was
And
he lucky to be on the pitch though?
We'll come on to that. I think this is a very valid point. But that's ultimately that summed up the first half for me. I think you're right. 43 minutes, Estepinian slips at a gilt-edged chance, and you go, right, brilliant. And then the last bit of the first half that I completely missed was Van Hecker just getting a stud in the face by Belabor himself. So the old bandage around the head and looking even more like a proper centre back. Like it was a good sight for people that enjoy early 90s football. But yeah, that's thoughts on the first half. I think I've got a few things on here, but ultimately that's pretty much summing it up, right? You have your chances. There's a couple of chances for West Ham as well. I think there's a couple of breakaways from Bowen that is dangerous, and I think we did see that in the second half. But that first half, you come in a little disappointed that you haven't scored, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think our XG was still something like 0.07 at half time. But yeah, I think.
Not, yeah.
But I think it's one of those ones where we created quite a lot, but none of them, as the stats would say, none of them particularly like really kind of clear-cut chances. But it felt like two teams who, for different reasons, are kind of really needed a win. But it also felt like two teams who also didn't want to lose another game.
Right, exactly.
So it felt very cagey in that first half. No one really wanted to overcommit at either end of the pitch.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's just abject. I think the word Adam used, because I think Adam was at the game yesterday, and sort of there was a lot of unhappiness towards that first half, because I think you're right. It was cagey, and you need to go out on the front foot and try and get a goal or two, because again, the results just haven't been our way. So you go into half time, you go, right, there's probably something here. There's a goal here somewhere. And then you come on to like 50 minutes, right? So you start the second half. We started right. I think we started really well. And you take the chance that it comes up. It's not pretty. It's not a magically worked goal. But Dunk challenges for the ball against Fabianski. He doesn't claim it, and Weaver's there to sort of scramble it home. So a good goal. We needed that. You go 4 or 5 minutes after the half, you go, that's the perfect start, right? Like, now we can manage this game and we can do what Herzler does and manage this. But a good goal, I think it's just something that you take. I'm very happy for Weaver. I think he's got a bit of a bad sort of run of it lately, just because he hasn't had a consistent run of games. So with him in there and consistently playing, I think you're only going to see him get better and better. I'm also very happy that he's managed to get on the score sheet as well. That's not his job, but it's right place, right time. And a good goal. We needed that, right?
Oh, definitely. Like I say, well, I mean, we kind of had it in that Palace game where we came out in the second half and we looked very different to the first half, but we just couldn't get the early goal. And it's that classic, when you're on top and when you're exerting pressure, you need something to show for it.
Yeah.
And too often we've seen us have really good periods of play and just not be able to convert it. So we don't tend to score many really like, calling it a scruffy goal feels a bit harsh, but you know what I mean? We don't tend to score many scrappy goals like that.
Those sort of chances that present themselves, right? I think that's what it is that you haven't made this opportunity through hard work and talent. Like, this is, you're going up and you just react to the situation. A very reactive finish. So yeah, you're right. So, but it's what we needed. I think it feels like, okay, now we can crack on from here, right? And I'm just going to take a step back, because we talked about the opening 10, 15 minutes of working teams out and then applying that pressure from about 15, 20 minutes in. The fact that we can't, I guess that almost negates the idea of us getting a quick goal at the start of the game and then managing it out, right? So like, that's what you're giving up by having this fluid attacking system, is the ability to quickly go and score a goal, unless it's a very reactive goal like we're talking about here. So you give and you take, right? Like, that's it. And I think we'll come on to Herzler and the system and how we're playing on the whole, because we're basically the last game before Christmas. So we'll come on to a holistic view in a bit. But that's what you give up. But that's also what you take at the same time. So good goal. I think we needed it. you're 1-0 down, and it lasts for 7 minutes, right? And I think that's the sign of a team that's low in confidence, that where our luck just isn't going our way as well. Sort of a counter attack, a breakaway. Bowen is in the middle. He's just shifted from the right to more of a cam, and he's created a really good chance. Good save from Verbruggen. Could have pushed it out a little bit further, but it's a good finish from Kudus. It's a stretch as well, and all of a sudden it's 1-1, right? So counter-attacking as well seems to be our kryptonite a little bit, and we get caught again, and that's a real shame. But just your thoughts on maybe the equalizer, right?
Yeah, I think it's slightly unlucky because Dunk tries to block it, but I think it just goes through his legs. It's really unlucky. It's a good save, and it's one of those shots where you can see that so many times where it doesn't go perfectly to Kudus's head, right? He doesn't have to break stride, does he? Really, it's right there. So I think it is a little bit unlucky.
Do you put any blame on Verbruggen for the save or not?
It feels harsh to. I mean, I can see your point of ideally you want to push it out wider. I can see that. I don't know. It feels a bit harsh to blame him, but I could see that point of view.
For the record, I'm not. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, it's a good save. To make it a perfect save, you'd push it out wider, but
yeah,
you're not legislating for it ending up perfectly on Kudus's head, really.
And like you said, it's also gone through Dunk's legs, right? He's seen it late. Like, I think he's done as much as you can with it. But it's one of those. It is. And all of a sudden, you're sort of back to square one, right? You get to 58. Completely forgot Weeper comes off with an injury, right? I hope that's not too serious, because I thought he had an excellent game. I think if he plays the whole game, he might even be man of the match, because I just thought he was really solid defensively. Attacking, he was in the right place. So Ayari comes on for Weeper, and 2 minutes later we concede. You make a couple of changes at 68 as well. I think we've got some Enciso talk in the chat as well, just coming on 68 minutes, along with Yankuba Minte. But after that, it starts to get scrappy again, doesn't it? And you try and fight for an equalizer, and you try and make something happen again. And you're talking about the first half again, around that sort of huffing and puffing, really trying, creating opportunities, but just not having that clinical edge to finish it off. So you have Enciso come on, you have Minte come on, you have Lamptey come on as well. You try and make those changes. What did you think of the subs in the second half and the timing of those subs?
Yeah, I mean, I know he's had some criticism for the timing of his subs in a few games. He's been really it's been really black and white, because there are some games where he's absolutely nailed the timing of it and the personnel involved. And there have been other games where he's made the right changes but too late, like Liverpool. Newcastle, he made bang on, right players, right time. So I don't know. I can't quite work it out yet, because like I say, he's not consistently doing it really well or really badly at the moment. But as far as this game's concerned, I thought it was right. Gruder, obviously a first start. He'd kind of been in and out of the game, and we've seen what Minte can do as an impact player at Leicester recently as well. So it felt like a good change to bring him on as well. As I say, Enciso I thought was probably unlucky to not be in contention for a start as well. So that it seemed like good changes. Again, I had no real complaints with them at the time.
Yeah. What does it say to you that Gruder starts instead of Enciso yesterday?
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's really difficult, isn't it? Because I think we've talked about the fact that we've got a slightly lopsided squad, right? When it comes to the number of attackers that we've got versus the slight lack of right backs and centre halves that we've got. So I appreciate from Hertz's point of view, he has got, 6 or 7 attackers, all of whom are I'm saying a relatively similar standard. You can make arguments either way, but
I agree.
Largely they're a similar standard, and they all want minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to balance all of that against the overall performances that we're putting in, the opposition that we're playing. So it's like, what kind of games, where are you going to fit minutes in for Gruder? I mean, he would get pelters if he chucked him in, like Man City away, for instance, for like a first start, I imagine.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly thankless task when you've got that many attackers to try and fit in. So it's difficult.
Yeah. And you're still looking at a dinger that didn't even get on the pitch yesterday, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you're, again, I'm being antagonizing to an extent, right? But it's there's obviously talk about Enciso not being happy or potentially finding another club, maybe on loan in January. We'll come on to January in the next couple of episodes anyway. But it's just interesting to me that Kruder gets the start. I think you've got a very good Adingra that can play on that side. You've got a good Minte. I like Minte. I thought he did really well yesterday. I think we'll come on to the main chance, but I thought he did really well. And I thought Enciso at Palace, like you said, was the bright spot, and continues to show enthusiasm in getting around and making something happen from nothing, which is something that Pedro has, which is something that Matoma has, is being able to create from nothing. And that's what we need. That's what you miss. That's what you require in games like that, where you're 1-1 against West Ham and you're reaching for that second goal.
You need the balance as well, right? Like, you've got Matoma,
Yeah.
who's a genuine winger, right? You know where you're going to find Matoma, which is you're going to find him hugging the touchline largely and wanting to take on his fullback.
Yeah.
And you need someone you need a Ruta type character who, as we've said, is this kind of bulldog, right? Who will just make his way around anywhere in the kind of front third and do that kind of job. So he's also got that element as well, which is that he's got all those players to fit in, but there's only certain combinations of them that work together. As well.
It's not a plug and play.
Really difficult.
Yeah.
No, it's really difficult. Like, you couldn't chuck in, like, if you put in, I don't know, like, I can't imagine having Minte. I can't imagine starting Minte and Enciso, for instance, together, because you get the certain element that if they both have an off game and they're both not working hard off the ball, you've suddenly got a gigantic hole.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. Like, it's a real conundrum, and I know we'll come on to it, like you say, in other episodes, but it kind of comes on to that where you go, for the benefit of everyone, does at least one of them need to go on loan? Not because of any other reason than just actually it's making Herzler's job really difficult to
it's not
actually put anything together.
Yeah, and it's not that they're not good enough; it's that they don't fit. And I think that's why January will be very interesting, because a lot of noise has been made around the amount of money that we spent in the summer, and rightly so, right? That's an enormous amount of money. We've never spent that before, and you've got a 31-year-old manager as well that's trying to make things work and work with what is now a full depth Premier League team, and keeping them happy cannot be easy. And I think that's where it comes from as well, is that if you do see either people going out on loan or people going out permanently, it won't be because they're not good enough. It will be because we need to keep the balance, or we already have someone that is better in that position or can play in multiple positions, right? You saw Alfie in the chat talk about the fullback issue. Kadioglu hasn't been available for what feels like months now, and helps us in that versatility aspect in both in a fullback and the attacking roles, and being defensive whilst also being attacking. So the idea of Herzler's philosophy and the way that we play is versatility. You need to be able to be a Minte or a Matoma, where you can play wing back, fullback, and also be an elite winger to take on players. You need to be able to be a Pedro that can drop into the center defensive mid and bring it all the way through the second third of the pitch. So that's why you'll see people leave, as I think there'll be people that cannot compete with the versatility of some of these players. And that's the issue that we're seeing. We've got too many good players, and you upset the balance in trying to keep all of them happy. Yeah. Anyway, way off tangent, right? Well, we've got two more bits to talk about. 80 minutes. Minte does really well on the right-hand side. Manages to get across, hits the post. It seems to hit Matoma on the way back out. And Fabianski just manages to scramble to get the ball. Another iteration of Minte making things happen as an impact player, like you said. But ultimately, that's your chance, right? That's the golden goose that would have won us the game.
100%. You've got that. It's just it's another kind of comedy chance, really. It just pinballs around a little bit, and you look at the number of times I look at it, I go, it's more unlikely that it doesn't end up in the back of the net.
Yeah.
And yet somehow here we are, it doesn't. It's just, it's symptomatic of when your luck's out, right? Like when your luck's out, that, when your luck's in, that takes a deflection off Mitoma or a defender and goes in off the post, right? Like,
yeah,
it's fine margins.
That's exactly what I thought. And as soon as that happens, you go, this isn't our day, right? They're just, no matter, we could play for 2.5 hours, and we still wouldn't be able to score because it's just not there today. And sometimes that happens, but it's a good chance. I think Minte makes a couple of good chances, like in that last sort of 10 minutes. There's another one where he pulls the crossover, just overhit a little bit, but he's getting in that positions and he's crossing that ball into a very dangerous area. I thought he did really well when he did come on. So there you go. Bit of a crap one. And then 84 minutes, we'll talk about Estepinian now. In quite a silly challenge, to be honest. I think I'm probably giving away how I feel about it. But he goes in on I can't remember who it was that he tackled. It was Max Kilman, I think it was. And he goes in, studs up, like gets the ball, but also follows through, studs up, and it's quite high. For me, lucky that it's a yellow. But I think from your side, your thoughts, and because you go, right, our luck's out, we're not having any luck, and then 4 minutes later we get away with a challenge like that.
Yeah, it's a kind of orange card, isn't it? Which is one of those ones where had it been given as a red card, it's not being overturned by VAR. It's a silly challenge to make. It's a silly challenge.
Do you think he slips? Or?
Well, we've seen he is prone to slipping. He is prone to slipping. So I don't know. No, I think it's just a slightly over ambitious challenge. And we get away with it and we move on. But it's a classic. I wouldn't, I'm not surprised that it wasn't a red, but I equally wouldn't have been, had it been a red, I don't think many people could really have complained about it.
Yeah, and that's how I feel about it. I think it probably should have been a red. I think it, and the only reasoning behind that is that if that happens to us, if that's Max Kilman on Estepinian, I'm fully expecting a red from the attacking side. Or if that happens to us, then you see those given, and I expect those to be given with the current refereeing, right? I think Rob Jones was the ref yesterday. Like, he sent off 3 people last time he refereed us. So like, I was equally surprised that he wasn't a bit trigger happy with that. But for me, I think it's a red. Again, you win some, you lose some, right? I think this we've talked about VAR ad nauseum. We know it doesn't work, or it isn't fit for purpose, either the people running it or the actual technology. But we got away with one. I feel like we have, and it could have got worse, right? It could have gone down to 10. We could have been under the cosh for 10, 15 minutes, and that would have been really tough. And also, if you get a man sent off, you spend 15 minutes with 10 men and you still draw 1-1, this is a much more positive conversation. So like, it's just one of those things. But I think he's lucky. I thought otherwise, apart from that and the slip, I thought he was really good yesterday.
We've seen him the last few weeks. He's been back to the kind of Estepinian that certainly closer to the levels of the Estepinian that we saw at his height, really. It must be very frustrating for him because he's had multiple injuries. And especially in that, he's the kind of player where we've seen he's kind of similar to Webster, in that he needs a run of games before you really get him back up to speed. And he's just not been able to get it for whatever reason. But no, he had a good game.
He moved into midfield quite a lot in that second half.
Yeah, it was bizarre, wasn't it? We've seen a few of that. We've seen some odd positional switches. The Southampton game, we saw Van Hecker ending up playing right wing for, for some of that game. So yeah, it's just what we have to get used to. under this kind of tactical flexibility. I'm interested in your thoughts on the Ferguson chance as well. That was a kind of a bit of an air shot.
Yeah, it was next on the list. So I think he strikes me as someone that just has zero confidence right now. Like, just absolutely nothing. We know from a capability perspective, from a talent perspective, he puts those away 99 times out of 100 in training. And I think you don't even need to watch the training to know that he probably puts those away relatively comfortably. He's just someone that just isn't there right now. It's a real shame. Obviously, he had a lot of sort of injury time off and hasn't been able to hit those heights that we saw. We know he's good. We know he's really good. But he's just
in his head, isn't he? Like the way I've looked at it, the other day I was looking at some of his goals that he scored when he first, kind of came into the team. And the thing that strikes me when I look at that versus how he is now is he almost wasn't thinking for those early chances. He was instinctively just the chance would come and instinctively he's putting it away. And I imagine, he's not the only striker to go through this, right? It's human nature, I imagine, as a centre forward where, he's got something like he's got something now like one goal in his last 44 appearances, something like that.
That's tough.
I may be right. It's definitely in the 40s, right? I think it's 42, 43, 44, something like that. So it's human nature, right? I imagine as a top level striker, when you're putting up or not putting up the numbers, you're in your head, right? You're trying to think, what am I doing differently? What am I missing? What should I be doing? What shouldn't I be doing? And by the time you've had that thought or those series of thoughts, the chance has gone, right?
Yeah.
It's really it's fairly like kind of basic psychology, I think, that's affecting it. It's really tough. And I thought after the Wolves game, I thought after he put that one away in the Wolves game, I thought that might have been the turning point. What probably, it's weird as well. Maybe had we won that Wolves game, had his second goal actually, had we won that 2-1, right?
If it won us the game,
it's the winner, right? You can, it might not have been the last goal scored in the game, but it's effectively the winner, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that might have been different, but he got this. It's his luck or bad luck as well that he gets his goal in a game that's then completely overshadowed by something totally out of his control. It's just the way it's going. Like you say, the talent is there, and the odd thing was, I was going to come onto this sort of towards the end, but it's probably the right time to mention it now. He actually had our highest XGI yesterday of 0.3.
It doesn't surprise me with the two chances that came his way.
Yeah,
I think just with the header, the second chance he's not getting there, right? Like that.
No, it's more difficult.
He's in the right position, and people are looking for him. And that's,
and he nearly laid on a goal for. He laid on a chance for Ayari as well, I think. So he nearly
straight at the keeper. Yeah, and that's it's right at the end of the game. He's good. I think he also suffers from a lack of playing time, which is, I think, where these sort of rumors are coming, where he needs more game time. He needs to find that elsewhere if he hasn't got it here. And again, for a future episode, right? I think for now, as a striker that scored one goal in 44 games, and you're coming on for the last 5 minutes of the game, that's really tough. And that counts as a game. Like, that's the thing with these stats, is that's now 1 in 45.
And also, you're talking about, I mean, we talked about it a few minutes ago. We're talking about a situation where, in theory, his main competition in Danny Welbeck's been injured for a few weeks. And yet, Hertzler has decided to play João Pedro in not his preferred role ahead of Ferguson. So you're now becoming this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So in his head, he's thinking, well, even when my direct competition's injured, the manager is preferring to play somebody in essence out of position ahead of him. So, again, when you're lacking confidence, what's that gonna? And this is no shade on Hertzler, right? It's more just, from a Ferguson's point of view, what does that say to you as an individual, that your manager is choosing to play somebody, not ill-suited to the role, but actually, as we've talked about, who, for the overall balance of the team, probably plays better not in that role.
Yeah. And again, for the sake of not repeating myself from earlier, like the balance of the team and that flexibility of those attacking players, Ferguson just can't drift out to the left. He can't pull into that sort of center attacking mid role, and he can't be on the right. So like, you're right, his only direct competition is Welbeck, but if you sacrifice the balance of how things are working, then it's not going to work. I want him to get more minutes. I really do. And I want to see him fulfill this potential that we all can see. But at the moment, it's just not there. And which brings me on to my next question is, what do you do about that? Right? Do you keep him around so that you have an attacking option off the bench? Because as we saw yesterday, if those two chances fly and he wins the game for us, like that's a super sub, and you keep him around for that, right? You need someone like that. Look at John Duran at Aston Villa, for example. So do you do that, or do you get him sustained game time?
I think we have to. I think we have to keep him on the basis that, and this is a slightly probably the wrong way to look at it, but it's on the basis that Welbeck's been out injured for what, 3 or 4 weeks now, feels like, and Hertzler said in not so many words that he's not in a particularly good place injury-wise, right? So it's also been rumours about him going back to Man United, and whether this is a very convenient injury, conspiracy theories aside. Either way, he's not been available for 4 weeks. And if you take Hertzler at his word, the injury is not healing just around the corner, right? So Welbeck's probably going to be out for a chunk of time more. You've then got the fact that João Pedro is not immune from an injury himself, right? He's had a fairly couple of decent periods of time out with injury.
Yeah.
So I know it's a slightly bizarre situation, because I know that we talked a few minutes ago about having too many attackers, right? In certain senses.
But you're also
in this particular area, we don't have that many that can play through the middle. I mean, could Jorginho do it? I don't know. He probably could.
I think he
would
could.
You want him to? I don't know. He probably could. But again, I think you keep him around. And then the other thing is, if you send him out on loan, it's very much like it can be taken in two ways. It can be taken of a very pragmatic, positive way to go, actually, look, it's not working at the moment. We need you to go out and play for whoever it is and get some goals. Brilliant. He scores 10 goals, goes to Leeds or someone top end of the championship, scores 10 goals, happy days. But equally, you can take that same thing to be like, it's an admission of failure, right?
Yeah.
On the part of the coaching staff, on the part of Ferguson himself, etc.
Yeah.
It's a tricky, like, depending on where you fall on the spectrum, still, it can be taken in two very distinct ways.
I'm glad it's not my problem, basically, because I agree with you. I think you are 1 or 2 injuries away from having a serious problem, even with the plethora of attacking threat that you have. A lot of it is wide. So we've talked about the wingers and how we can interchange those. Matoma is nailed on for me. So you're only switching out your right winger. And if you want to have this flexibility, you're playing Ruta at right wing, which means you're alienating. Well, I say alienating is a bit much, but like you're not playing Minte and Adingra, basically.
And Gruder.
And Gruder. I've always put Gruder in that sort of center attacking mid, in which case he's never playing, because Pedro's got that nailed until he gets injured or picks up a knock, right? Like that's, again, we spoke about that. So we'll see. I think January will be interesting. Again, one for another time. I think there was 2 more chances right at the end. There was the Ayari one that we just talked about, which Ferguson set up straight at the keeper. Either side, 93 minutes, you've won the game. And then right at the end, I think Lamptey just throws himself across, which Wan-Bissaka does really well to also just get out. But we were huffing and puffing again, like just keep going, keep on trucking, like just keep creating chances, put them in the box. Now you've got Ferguson in there, see if he can get his head on it. If he can't, Lamptey's at the back post. But ultimately, it just wasn't to be, and it finishes 1-1. And for me, it's not the worst result in the world, right? I don't think we did enough to win. I also don't think that we were that bad that we lose. And I think it comes to your point right at the start, where these are 2 teams that don't want to lose. So what happens? You come up with this little stalemate where the XG is less than 2 for both teams. So KG, I think ultimately, I think both teams will be happy with a point and you move on. It does leave us going into Christmas in 10th at the moment with Spurs losing the game against Liverpool right now as we record. So you go into Christmas 10th. Your thoughts, I think, on the game as a whole, but also just from the start of the season to Christmas Day, like, how do you feel and where's your Albion mojo at right now?
The game itself, yeah, I think what we said earlier, it sums it up. It's a classic. We just didn't want to lose the game. I think as much as we, hadn't won in 4 going into the game, it's very much if you then lose again, right, off the back of that Palace game.
That's when you start to get into trouble.
Yeah, I think it's almost like they had to, if you were offered it, you go, as much as a win would have been nice, it's like, I think a loss, I think the risk of losing the game wouldn't have outweighed really, properly going for it. I think. I think it's a fair result. I think if either team was going to win it, it was going to be us. I think we were I don't think either team particularly deserved to win it, but I think we were closer than they were,
especially with the Minte chance.
Definitely.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, they had chances too, right? There was a goalmouth scramble from a corner. Like, there was a few good chances where they've just able to get into some clean air with a counter attack. But
yeah, I mean, Bowen had their highest XG was Bowen with 0.75.
It's a good player.
It kind of tells you he's a good player.
And this West Ham team is no slouch to me. This is my own opinion. I think they are where they are in the table for a reason, but you've got Wan-Bissaka at full pelt now, who is a very good right back.
I think he's the best. I think he's the best one-on-one defender in the Premier League.
Yeah, he's the only defender that I've seen keep Matoma quiet for a sustained period of time. Like,
I watched him. This is a bit of a tangent, but the FA Cup semi-final we had against Man United in that game that he started for them, and we were behind one of the goals, and in one of the halves, genuinely watching him, I was like, he is, as a one-on-one defender, he's very phenomenal.
Good. He's phenomenal. And I hate that because he's a Palace youngster, right? But like, just credit where it's due. I think he had a torrid time at Man United and has sort of come into his own at West Ham. And like you said, he's a great right back. And then if you have Bowen on the right hand side as well, like that too for West Ham is very important. It's a shame about the Antonio stuff. I thought Fulkrug was shocking. I thought like he offered absolutely
30 million quid, I think. 30 million quid he cost them, yeah.
And sort of trudged off after 55 because he couldn't run anymore.
And Somerville comes on and they score within about 2 minutes. I mean, not that he had anything to do with it, especially, but maybe it's the momentum that creates.
Or maybe it's not having someone walking up and down the centre circle.
Yeah, just getting in the way, basically. I mean, overall Albion mojo, slightly schizophrenic about it, to be honest. I can't really decide.
So I asked you for a reason because I feel there's a certain negativity across social media at the moment, right? And I think this is why I'm sort of asking about it. Is that the start that we made was an incredible start, but as we start to drop points against teams that we knew we were going to drop points to, right, it starts to become quite negative, especially in these last sort of 5 games where we haven't won. But this was always going to happen.
It's always going to be a tough challenge. I mean, I did jokingly say, I don't know if you were on the podcast, the episode after Man City, immediately after Man City.
I'm not sure.
I did jokingly say we probably won't win again until the new year. And I was sort of half expecting to be correct and half expecting hopefully to really not be correct. But yeah, I mean, I'm really schizophrenic on it. Because, you've got all of on the one side of the coin, this is probably going to be quite a long sort of dull summary of it. But on the one side of it, you've got obviously all of the churn in the summer, right? Of losing Gross, losing Gilmore, and that kind of pivot, those players that we've seen who are really composed, particularly Pascal Gross, when it comes to seeing out a game or getting a goal when you need one. We've done all of that to death, right? The clutch players we've kind of lost. You've then got the fact that, Fabian Hertz is coming into a new league with, I'm not going to mention his age because I really don't think his age is actually relevant, but more the fact he's coming into the Premier League, right? Having not managed in a top division.
Yeah.
anywhere. So you've got all of that on the one side, and you're coming off the back of effectively 6 months where the team was dreadful, right?
Mhm.
So you've got that challenge immediately. You're not coming in as De Zerbi did on the back of, he came in while we were at a pretty high
We were
point,
fourth.
right?
Yeah.
We were fourth. We just put 5 goals past Leicester. He's coming.
Easy.
He's inheriting a very good position. As much as he didn't have
Yeah.
a pre-season, he's coming in at a good moment.
Yeah.
Hurtsler's coming in at quite a challenging moment for all of those reasons. So that's the the circumstance that he's come into, and I think all of that is very difficult. I think those circumstances will be difficult for a very experienced manager to come in and basically lose a few very. I mean, Lallana's gone as well, right? Like, I mean,
you lost leaders. Is what?
Yeah,
we
you've
did.
lost leaders all over the pitch and clutch players. So a very experienced manager would struggle to come into that atmosphere. So I'm totally appreciative of he's come into a very difficult situation. The problem that he inherited was 3 things really. One, and I think every Albion manager, certainly for the foreseeable future, is going to be judged on this. It's the very fact of what De Zerbi did, right?
Yeah.
Has created. You can call it unrealistic expectations if you like, and I've seen
a very high bar. Yeah.
He's set a very high bar of what is possible.
Yeah.
And not just he's not just done it by actually qualifying 6th, having the European run, all of that. He changed, and we've heard Paul Barber say that De Zerbi basically changed the mentality because he came in and was basically like, why the hell not?
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of moved the bar. So the fact that he's done that has, for a lot, I don't know, it's very difficult to know, as a fan base as a whole, what proportion of people are sitting where on the, scale. But for a section of the fan base, he has we've got this expectation now that De Zerbi did it. Why the hell not? You can get into the ins and outs of, well, he had McAllister and Caicedo, and he had this kind of world class, midfield pivot that we haven't got now. But either, that aside, he did it, right? So for a lot of people, that creates this expectation that why shouldn't we do it again? You've then got Tony Bloom and Paul Barber have not quite gone that far, but have both said basically there's no reason why we can't be going back to Europe in the, not necessarily this season, but, in the foreseeable future. So you've got this expectation that's been created. So when you've got that narrative, that doesn't give Hurtsler an awful lot of wiggle room, right? We don't have for a section of the fan base, you don't have the time. You might think, all of the facts might tell you that actually he needs a couple of years to bed this in, right? And that's a very reasonable opinion to have. But it's against this expectation that's been created, rightly or wrongly. It's there, right? Whether people like it or not, it's there for a certain chunk. And then you overlay the £200 million spend, which, as we've talked about, it's very nuanced, right? A lot of that £200 million spend is on players for the future, right? So it's not £200 million that's been pumped into the best 11. But as a headline figure, in the media, they're going to go, Brighton spent 200 million quid, right? So again, that creates a certain level of expectation. So it's very difficult. So I think from a kind of expectation point of view, I think Hurtsler is in a very difficult situation from that perspective. And that's not getting onto kind of the style. So when it comes to the expectation level, I think it's going to kind of come, and I said this to someone recently, I think it's going to come down to if we don't end up in a European spot this season, I think it comes down to the manner in which we miss it. If we are on a very positive trajectory and we finish 8th or 9th and we're not a million miles away, and you go, fine, right, this hurts his first season in the Premier League. We got pretty close, considering all the churn, all the new players coming in, different style, all of that. We got pretty close. I think everyone would kind of pat themselves on the back and go, great, right, next season we can target 6th or 7th. Brilliant.
Yeah.
If, and it's a pretty big if we were to finish 12th or 13th, right, I think that creates a slightly different and more difficult conversation. So if we end up being further away from Europe than we started at the start of the season, I think that creates a more difficult conversation. That's not to say I'm saying Tony Bloom's going to pull the trigger, but I think it creates a much more difficult conversation.
True. And you spoke about sort of the style of play as well, right? I think for my 2 cents, I think he's safe as houses, right? And I do think you're right. The extent of which you miss, or how far you miss it by, will ultimately change the fans' perception of whether it was a successful season or not, right? Regardless of whether you've changed the entire coaching staff, you've lost Lallana, Gross, and a few other leaders. You could even lose people in January if it really comes down to it. And you're trying to build and build and build with a new manager, new talent, new coaching staff. And then you've got this expectation looming over you that you competed in Europe 2 years ago, or like you need to, or last year or whenever, and you need to do that again. I think the expectation has always been top 10, right? And if you finish this season, currently we're 10th, right? So, for me, on par, right? We had a really good start. We've dropped off a little bit. That happens. You're not Liverpool this season. You're going to have those inevitable drop-offs. So for me, we're on par from where I think we should be, right? We're 2 wins off of 4th, by the way. This league is mental today, like this year. So from a club perspective, I don't see Hurstler going anywhere. I don't see him under any threat. I think he has full confidence. Even if you finish 13th or 14th, you go, right, we're just going to have to explain this one away, right? Like and we'll just regroup next year and we'll continue to do this and continue to build. From a fan perception perspective, especially with the good start, with the amount of money, with Europe still fresh in our minds, you start to go on these runs of 5 or 6 without a win and you go, why isn't this team doing better than we think it should be doing? And that's where you can see a more hostile environment. You can see people not going and the Amex not selling out, or noticeable displeasure on social media if you incline on doing that. So it's just interesting for me to ask. And I think I'm average, right? I'm still good because I think you could win a couple of games, right? Just to reel them off. You've got Brentford at home on Friday. You've got Villa away on Monday. And then you wait until Saturday, the 4th of Jan for Arsenal, right? The Arsenal one, again, not particularly worried. But if you can get 4 points from Brentford and Villa, all of a sudden, this is a completely different conversation.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're going into that game, right? Brentford have got the worst away record in the division, I think. They've got 1 point. Or maybe match with Southampton, probably. But I think the last thing I'd say on it is the style question is really interesting because, like, reading social media, you obviously have to filter through a lot of nonsense, right? Where it's just people ranting and not actually, making any kind of coherent point. But if you pick out the points where people are actually talking sense, you may disagree with what they're saying, but you can see the line of their argument. One of the things that I've pulled out is that a lot of it focuses on the style or the perceived lack of style.
Yeah.
Right. And we've talked about it in this episode, right? This kind of ultimate flexibility that he's got. He's not wedded to particular positions. We've talked about it in a few different ways in this episode. And it can be viewed very much as a double-edged sword, like all this stuff. A lot of people go, well, that's great, right? Because he's not wedded to a particular style, so he can be flexible. He can adapt to different opposition, different situations within a game.
And I think we've seen
this kind of thing. Well, we have.
There's good evidence of that.
But then you've got the kind of, and people will point to it and go, look what happened to De Zerbi, who was wedded to, religiously wedded to one way of playing, and he was going to shoehorn, even if he didn't have people fit, he was going to shoehorn them into particular roles in his system because that's how he played, right?
Yeah.
For better or for worse. But the flip side of that, which is seen some of the criticism, is that the lack of system can be used as the basis of the criticism for some people, i.e., it's chaos, right? The players don't know what they're doing. This is not my opinion. This is me kind of, paraphrasing what some of the opinions have been, but it's more like it can be used as a stick to beat him with, as much of, the players don't know what they're doing. There's no system. There's a lot of shrugging, kind of shrugging going on and kind of arm waving, etc. So it's almost, it all comes back to that perception again. which is that for a certain chunk of the fan base, if they perceive that there's no system and you're not getting the results, like I said, if you go on this run of what we're up to, 5 games without a win, if you suddenly get to Arsenal and you've not beaten Brentford and you've not won at Villa, you're up to 7 games without a win. And if you've got this, and then you've got Arsenal, likely to be 8, and then you're on to Ipswich away, I think, pretty soon after that, which is a bit of a banana skin in this division. If I know there's a lot of ifs going on, but if you get to that point where you're approaching, say, 10 games without a win, and there's no kind of conceivable style for some people, it becomes really difficult, doesn't it? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I can see again, for people that have put forward that argument in a rational way, I can see it.
Right. Whilst you don't agree with it, you can understand how they've come to that
I can understand how they've come to it. So I think we're I'm totally with you. Like, I don't think he's in any danger from obviously from Tony Bloom and Paul Barber's point of view. But in the kind of court of fan opinion, as it were, I do think he's treading a bit of a dangerous line at the moment.
I think he's with five without a win, you have to be open to some sort of scrutiny, right? Like then, and that's. I'll come back to the style thing just around. There's clearly a philosophy, right? But what if the style is that there isn't a style, right? We've talked about this sort of semi-organized chaos or this tactical flexibility of this team being able to move in and around and be able to fulfill different positions. Maybe that is the style, that there isn't this regimented 4-4-2 Mike Bassett type deal, right? Like there's the fact is that anyone can play anywhere, and that's the most confusing thing to opposition, right? You obviously have the talent, right? You've spent a lot of money on the talent and the ability. There's talent in this squad. There's also a high IQ in being able to play in that way, but I think we're still trying to figure this out. And I'll go way back to our preseason review, right, where we said when it clicks, it will click, right? And I still do believe that to an extent. I think we had some really good early results, and I think that kind of flattered us a little bit in terms of who we are as a team and where we should be. And I think 10th is fine, but I do think this will click eventually. And when it does, and when we do operate at a very good level, I can see us being able to beat most teams in this league. And I think that's where my Albion mojo may not reflect social media's version or iteration of their mojo, right? Is that there's still promise here, and I can see the end goal. It's just it's taking a while to get there. And this is, like you said, this is an inexperienced coach, right? He's been coaching for 10 years, but the top level was the second Bundesliga. This is a different kettle of fish. Like, he needs that time too. So we'll see. It's always a fun thing to talk about, because I think there's a lot of negative people out there. There's a lot of positive people out there. Most people fall within the middle. But it's just something to bear in mind that we're now coming up to halfway through the season. You're 10th. You've got sort of the second round of matches against everyone to go. And I think we are where we deserve to be. And I think
that feels about right, doesn't it? Do you think and I agree with you on the kind of the fact that his style may be a lack of style, for want of a better word. Do you think it's made more difficult for people to get used to because we've come off the back of 2 managers who had a very distinct style?
I think so.
Do you know what I mean? So people could kind of, under De Zerbi, obviously he had an ultra, as we said, he was, his colours were pinned to like one particular mast, right?
Yes.
Regardless. Yeah. Under Potter, we had a level of flexibility, right? But he had a style, right? This very strong possession base. So I think maybe there's a lot of, and I think that's where I am, right? Like, my own slight insecurities on it, I think come from that. Is that we've been used to, and probably, through Houghton had a particular style, probably going back to Poyet, probably every manager beyond Hippier for his brief stint.
Every manager has definitely no style there.
Yeah. Every other manager for the last decade, pretty much, and more, 10, 12 years, has had a particular style that they're wedded to. So it's probably it's difficult to, And I think it's difficult to get used to it. And I guess maybe it's slightly unfashionable these days to not have a particular style, right? We've seen Russell Martin, basically effectively choose to stick to his style, right? Even if it meant losing his job. Yeah. He wasn't prepared to change Southampton's approach, right? Yeah. So even it doesn't matter if obviously you've seen Guardiola and Klopp have got their styles at that end of the table. But you can even see it at the other end of the table. So it's quite unusual to see a manager who is ultra pragmatic. Yeah. And I'm finding it quite difficult to get used to.
It can be unnerving, I think. It's like, and I'm not. I don't think I'm saying there's no style or there's no philosophy here. There's a clear identity of what it is, and I think the identity is being tactically flexible, right? So like, there's no, like I said, there's no one way of doing things and a certain 11 that has to do it in a certain way. There is that sort of idea that people can float and do things, and if you see an opening, take the opening, right? Like you look at the heat maps of some of these attacking players.
I can see the like the argument for it. It's just that kind of slightly like you don't have the safety net of like predictable patterns of play to like fall back into. And we've seen it's the risk reward, right? Like his style seems to be underpinned, certainly in attack. It's a very much like risk reward, like the risks of attacking. Yeah. Like when it works, I'm with you. When it clicks and we start to put teams away, then it will work. At the moment, it's kind of like you can see it. You can see he's going for the risk of we're gonna overcommit in attack, but it's gonna work. Yeah. It's just very I'd say it's a really tricky moment right now.
It is, and I think you're onto something as well, where it is a little bit jarring to have a very different way of playing, even if the personnel are somewhat the same. It's still weird to watch, and I think you kind of don't know what to expect. And under any manager, like we saw it with the Zerbi, we saw it with Potter, you're going to drop points against these teams that are counteracting your style. Right. And I think that's where we struggled the most. And I think I'm going to end it on this point, is that the reason we play well against those bigger teams is that it's our style against theirs. And sometimes that underdog mentality and our style, when it isn't being counteracted, works. And that's why you beat City. That's why you beat United. That's why you get a point at Arsenal. It's why you beat Spurs. It's why you beat Newcastle. So that's why we play better against the big teams, because we're not being counteracted, right? This is very much, when you play against your Southamptons or you play against your Wolves or you play against your West Hams, the idea is to counteract how they're playing and not play your own style. And that's where we struggle. That's where the clicking element comes in. When we're able to just overrun people that are actively trying to stop us playing the way that we want to play, and we can still beat them, that's when you can be the majority of these teams. And that's that clicking moment.
I'm with you. And I think the other thing is it's also cutting out the error. I know we haven't talked about the errors in defence. We're running out of time now. But I think it's cutting out the things at the other end of the pitch. When I watched the Palace game, and it was on, I was abroad, so I watched it. But they had Adam Virgo was the co-commentator. I know he does quite a lot. And he, even before we conceded a goal in that game, he said it about 4 or 5 times in the first 20 minutes of the broadcast, which was Brighton will give you chances.
Yep.
So if you're Southampton, you're Crystal Palace, you're Wolves, you're Leicester, you can kind of sit back
and wait,
absorb the pressure, and you know that we're going to present you with 1 or 2 chances.
Yeah.
And if you take them, then
plain sailing. Yeah.
Plain sailing.
All right.
That's the other bit. Anyway,
we'll do 5 more minutes right at the end here. I think you're right. I think some of the defensive mistakes that we made yesterday. So I'm just going to go through any particular call outs of the game, like any good players, any bad ones, anyone that had an irregular sort of game. And I'll start with Van Hecker. I thought there was a couple of mistakes there, and I think a very slippery pitch. I don't think it was his best game yesterday. I thought he was good, but he set a very high bar now. So when he goes under that bar, you can kind of see it. I thought Dunk was good. I thought controlled really well. He's there because he's a leader, right? That's it. He commands and demands a lot on the pitch from everyone in there, along with Veltman. I thought he was great. Man of the match for me is probably Matoma. I know he came off at 85 minutes, but I felt anything that was going to happen was going to come through him and or João Pedro. And that's pretty much it. I thought Gruda was nervous. Vifa has to play again. I think Vifa Belieber is your midfield too now and has to be. I thought Mente was good when he comes on, just needs game time. Like, not anything crazy there, right? I really don't think there was. I think even Lamptey came on and made a difference. So all in all, I think my man of the match is Matoma. I think there was a couple of good performances in there as well. It's promising, right? That's what you needed after a loss, especially against Palace. But just interested in any particular call-outs for players.
Yeah, definitely Matoma was man of the match for me. I think João Pedro is trying too hard, as we alluded to. He needs a goal. At the moment, he's doing that classic thing where he is holding onto the ball too long in certain instances because he's trying to make something happen. And because we know he can make something happen. And he's just like, he's kind of on the cusp of like, say, he's just trying too hard. I mean, it will click for him. It will definitely click for him. I mean, I've just read, there was a report in the Guardian, the Guardian match report said João Pedro's habit was to keep the ball until the confusion spread also to himself. It just like, he's just trying too hard. I mean, I think I just like to, the quicker that we can get Welbeck back or get Ferguson a run up top, I think is better all round. We thought it was probably his best game. I think the goal will do him a lot of good. Like you said, it's not his job to do that, but the bonus of getting a goal, which has got a point, I think will do him a world of good. Yeah, Dunk was decent. I think no one had a world-beating game, but thankfully no one had a disastrous game either, really. So same. Good. I mean, that's like we said, neither team wanted to lose the game, right? Like it was a very kind of middle of the road performance, basically. A game where nothing really happened, but for about 7 minutes where 2 goals happened. And outside of that, I know we've strung it out for a while, but
we had to make an episode out of it.
Broadly, it was a pretty middle of the road.
Yeah, and I think it felt like a Christmassy type game, didn't it? There's a lot going on at the moment. There's a lot of games coming up. Like I said, next up we'll be live next weekend for Brentford, and we'll review that. Actually, we might even bundle that in with Villa. It depends on everyone's Christmas schedules. But yeah, it's one of those, and I think we're finishing Christmas in 10th. You're 6 points away from 4th, but also you're 6 points away from 16th. So it's a funny old league. We just need to keep on going. Like I said, it's better to draw than to lose. We could have lost that as well. So I think that was important. But I think that about wraps it up. Is there any sort of final bits from yourself?
Just got the Spurs-Liverpool game on. It's now 6-3 to Liverpool. It could have been 6-4.
This Spurs team, we talk about, I say this a lot on the pod, so people will get annoyed. I don't know if we're a good team in this league or not. And Spurs are very much within that category. They can go and beat Southampton 5-0 and put people to the sword. And then stuff like this will happen. It's a funny league this year. It really is.
Very funny league. But no, that's it, I think.
Good. All right. Nice one. Well, Thank you very much. And for everyone, happy holidays. We'll see you afterwards. I hope everyone gets a lovely break and spend it how you want to spend it. But thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you next week.
Thanks, everyone.